Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. In this video, I'm going to go over 3 different ways to import CAD data or CAD files into MODO. So if you do product rendering or mechanism of action animations, that kind of thing, you probably deal with CAD a lot. And if you're not familiar with MODO, this video will give you some options if you're working in MODO. And if you are working in MODO and you're dealing with CAD data for the first time, this is probably a must-watch video so you can understand how to bring this stuff in. And we're going to look at 3 different ways. Like I said, the 3 different ways we're going to look at here. And by the way, there's lots of different ways to do this. And so in the comments, you may want to make some other suggestions for other programs you use. These are 3 ways I'm showing you. So MODO has a native SolidWorks importer. So we're going to go over that. You can import SolidWorks files, SolidWorks parts, which are sort of individual meshes, and assemblies, which are these big reference scenes of parts. Natively, just bring them right into MODO. And that stems from the technology sharing deal that Luxology had with Dassault Systems, the maker of SolidWorks, from many years ago, and it still works, and it's great to have. Then there's Powertranslators. I don't know if that's 1 word or 2. Maybe it's 2. I'll just do that. No, I think it's 1. Anyway, that's the add-on that's sold by Foundry, and so it's a plugin for MODO, and that'll load in Parasolid and IGES and STEP and SAT and Rhino files right into MODO with a lot of MODO-specific options for bringing in meshes as replicators for the duplicates or instances or static meshes. And it's really pretty polished, and it's a good way to go. It's $500, but we'll go over that. And if you do a lot of CAD work like I do, it's really a must-have. Then there's one called CAD Assistant, which is a free for commercial and personal use. I just found this. It'll load all these files here, steps and IGES and all these things you're used to, but it'll also spit out like an OBJ. And so this is nice. If you don't want to spit out $500 for Powertranslators, you're okay with bringing in an OBJ and not having the extra features of replicators and things like that built into the importer. And you can't get a SolidWorks file. Oftentimes you'll get something like a STEP file. In fact, I would say STEP, S-T-E-P or STP is the most common file format that I get from my clients. But every once in a while you get these big SolidWorks assemblies as well. So let's just kind of get going. Let's look at SolidWorks first. Before I jump into this, let's just take a look at these, what we're going to be importing. So I just went over to GrabCad. If you don't know what GrabCad is, it's kind of like Sketchfab for CAD files, I guess you could call it. So it's a similar sort of thing. Users upload their designs. It has sort of similar licensing requirements. You need to give credit, and some are, you can use for commercial, I believe, and things like that. Just look at the licensing agreements. But here, I'm just giving credit. This electric scooter, we're going to look at a step file, and this is by Ravinder Kumar. He uploaded this, so I thought that was kind of a cool looking thing to use, so we're going to use that as a test. This cool Mando helmet we're going to look at by Jefferson Barboza. It's a SolidWorks part, just a single file. And then there's this SolidWorks assembly, which is this Dyson air purifier, whatever it is, fanless fan, or I guess that's an air purifier. Okay. Anyway, it's by Koray Okan. So thanks to those guys. I'm just crediting them before I get into this video. And again, GrabCad is just a great resource. I also put the Powertranslators link down at the bottom, as well as CAD Assist. And again, like in the comments, if you like Rhino, if you've downloaded the Rhino demo like 700 million times like I have in the past and just use it to translate stuff, that's fine. Like, throw your comments in the comment section. Okay, anyway, let's jump over to MODO and take a look at SolidWorks real quick. So let's look at the Mando helmet first. And so the Mandalorian helmet, we've got a SolidWorks part there, and that's the extension SLDPRT. Just 1 file, and then it's going to bring in just a mesh. So I'm going to hit OK there, and it's going to load it up. And we'll see a couple things here. First of all, it throws it in a folder, and you'll also see that it's this gray. It's not the typical blue mesh item you're used to. This is what's called a static mesh in MODO. It's a geometry type that was created by Stuart Ferguson, I believe, back when they were working with SolidWorks, and they were trying to find a more efficient mesh item for high poly geometry, right? Because all these CAD surfaces, solid surfaces, NURB surfaces are coming in into MODO, and sometimes these assemblies are monstrous. And this is at a time when, this is a couple million polygons, but these were created at a time when a couple million polygons was a lot. Now it's not really a lot. I've got a RTX 3090 in here. This is, whatever, piece of cake. But it comes in as this sort of static mesh. It's called a static mesh or a trisurf. And you'll notice if I go to component mode, if I go to like vertex mode or edge or polygon, I can't select anything. It's completely unselectable. It's just meant to be just like it says, a static piece of geometry. if you want to go in there and mess with the UVs or maybe do some UV work or modify it a little bit, you can right click on here and go to change type and change it to a mesh. You'll see it turn blue over here, and there it is. So now it's an editable mesh. You can call it that, or just a regular MODO mesh. And I can go in there and select points and polygons or whatever. Sometimes I've noticed my scenes are faster with a bunch of static meshes, and sometimes I've noticed that they're slower. And so you can always convert them. I typically convert them because I tend to want to have to be able to get in there and get to the UVs or the mesh level, and so that's what I do, but we'll talk a little more about that later. SolidWorks needs to always throw in 2 lights for whatever reason, and in a default camera, those always come in. If you look over at the shader tree, you'll notice that it does not have the typical render outputs, so you'll have to add those in, the alpha and the, whichever one you, at the minimum, you want to add in the alpha and the final color render outputs. And there's no base material in there, so it's really sort of, it does come in with materials though, which is sort of interesting, and we'll look at the fan model in a minute. Again, this is the collaboration between Luxology and Dassault Systems, where the MODO renderer was incorporated into SolidWorks, and so it actually has a MODO material library. And if you dig into these, you'll notice these names, like it actually brings the names over. So there's brushed steel, and sometimes you may get lucky and actually brings material properties over, but not always. And here you've got black right here. So the names are there, and so it's actually useful when you want to go in and start texturing these things, right, doing your material work, because you'll see that these human readable names come over often with SolidWorks files, and so that's a little bit of a nice little bonus there when working with SolidWorks files. And that that's kind of it. The tessellation on these again is a bit of a crapshoot. There's no file requester for deciding if you want to adjust your tessellation on the import, right? So it doesn't bring in the file, ask if you want like a very fine detail with a ton of polygons or very rough with just a few. You just get what you get, and what you get is, I believe, based on the SolidWorks display properties. So what this is, the SolidWorks part here, these polygons, where this geometry is coming from, is the OpenGL tessellated solid surfaces that are being displayed in SolidWorks' OpenGL view. And so if you have somebody with a decent computer and they have their OpenGL view set to a pretty high tessellation to have these things look pretty good in the viewport, you're going to get a lot of polygons that's going to look good. If they maybe work on a laptop and they have their OpenGL settings set to low and the tessellations set to low, you're going to get kind of crappy, jaggedy objects with not a lot of polygons. And that's just how that works. It's a free importer, comes with it, but there's not a lot of control. Okay, so that's SolidWorks part. Let's look at a SolidWorks assembly now. So I'm just going to close this guy, and let's open up that fan. So yeah, okay, so now this is more typically, ignore the LXOs there for now. Typically what you get if you get like a SolidWorks assembly from a client, you get something with a lot of these little part files. And oftentimes they're not named nicely like this, like numbered or where it says assembly. And you see this new extension here, SLDASM, that's SolidWorks assembly. If you get something big, like a big medical object or device or something like that, you may have hundreds of parts in there. Every little screw and bolt and rivet and washer and rubber ring and everything is a different part. And you may have multiple assemblies because the assemblies they can nest their references. So what an assembly will do is it references all these parts and it puts them all in the right place. And if you have multiple assemblies, again, you'll get these files from clients and there's no like heads or tail of which one you should load. Your best bet is always to, you sort by size and you look for the biggest assembly, the biggest SLDASM file. And that's probably going to be what you want. And all these sub-assemblies that are in the larger one are generally smaller files. Every once in a while you get something a little weird that may not be that case. But so here we're just going to pick the assembly. We're going to hit OK. All right, here's our air purifier. Let's see what we've got. If I flip open our group here, you'll see again there's static meshes, these gray boxes. So I can't actually go in here and select any polygons or points or edges and manipulate it. And that goes for UVs too. So they're just, again, the idea is it's supposed to be faster in your viewport. Your mileage may vary. In this advanced viewport, it starts off really slow, but it does eventually cache everything or get it into VRAM or whatever the hell it's doing that, it's slow for the first 2 seconds, but then it gets like super fast. So you can convert all of these. I've got a macro I made to do it. all at once, and then which maybe I'll show you how to make that in a different video, or you could just select them all like this. Just don't select your instances. And by the way, the MODO importer is smart enough to know instances. So you see a little purple here. That's just an instance of the front. You can right click and say find source. Where is that? Here. I thought you could. Could you not? Item operations. Set source of instance. Select source of instance, and it's the front there, right? So, you know, it is smart enough to use instances, although, again, there's no control over tessellation or using replicators. You just kind of get what you get. And, you know, again, you can just select everything but the instances here and right-click and change type to standard mesh. Another way you can do that is with a command. Let me just show you how to do that real quick in case you're doing a lot of this. So there's some screen garbage there with my... there we go. Okay, so, you know, for instance, we have an item command. We can go over here and say select all, or we go over under select and say select by item type. So I can say lights, right? And it's going to select all lights. And here we just selected these two lights in the scene. If you look at the command, it's select item type, light, and super : true. Well, we can adjust this a little bit to get just our, instead of our lights, to get just our tri-surfs there, or our static meshes, which are called tri-surfs internally. God, what is with this garbage on the viewport? So here we have select dot item capital letter type space, and then you just do try and then capital SURF surf like that, and hit enter, and it'll select all your static meshes there. And so sometimes you may have a list of 100 of these things, so it's good to know that command. Here I made it into a macro where it'll do that. It'll select them all, and then it'll convert them for me if I just go to change type and go to mesh. Now, when I do this, like, I notice sometimes there is a bit of a bug with how instances are treated when you convert their source, their static mesh source, into a mesh. So you'll see, I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second. So I convert these to meshes. And again, you don't have to do this, but if you intend on doing anything to the geometry, you do have to get in there and do that. Okay, so you see this little part jump out here. You see a little bit of garbage on the screen. So we'll get to that in a second. You'll also notice that there's some empty mesh items here now. So again, there's another script you can get that'll delete empty layers. I just put it up here on my shelf, and so I clicked it and deleted those. Again, maybe I'll do a shelf video, or workbench video, so you can see how those work. Or you can just run the script the old-fashioned way. But anyway, again, on assemblies where there's hundreds of items and you have like dozens of empty layers after you convert them, it's nice to have a script do it for you. But let's take a look at our instances here. So let's take a look at, let me just sort of isolate a couple of these guys. So yeah, this one. So this one's obviously messed up. The only way I found to fix it is to uninstance it. So you just right click and say, just, again, you convert, change type, and you go to mesh, and it corrects itself. So just like that. And so I'm going to do it for the other two as well. So it's a bit of a bummer that if you change everything to meshes, the instances get kind of screwed up. But I haven't seen that with every single SolidWorks file, but I've seen it lately, which means there may be a problem just with the versions where the MODO 15 may not be updated with the latest version of SolidWorks. You know, I really don't know. But at least you can fix it easily by just changing them into regular meshes. And so here we have our regular meshes. And again, it's pretty quick. There's, 1.5 million polygons in here. And again, it's nice if I just shift click that, you'll see that I've got names like, surface, satin finish, stainless steel. I've got, blue LED. I've got default plastic. I've got, dark gray, medium plastic. So I've got the names of the materials in here. They actually match up to the names of the materials in that MODO ships with. So if I go to MODO's materials, whoops, my search term in there, and I go to like plastics or whatever, and just like, what do we have? Like, what was that plastic? Let me take a look. Where'd it go? Dark gray, medium plastic. So we'll look at medium gloss, and we have here dark gray, medium plastic right there. Just gonna push in a little bit, zoom down. And it's the exact same material that, the SolidWorks designer used. I know this because I actually created all these materials for both MODO and Dassault systems like many years ago. And they're also super out of date. But, at least what I would do is I would just start over with the new. You'll notice, I would start over with the, physically based materials and just recreate them. But at least you know what the intended material is. So that's nice. Typically, you don't get that much information when getting a CAD file in there. So yeah, that's basically it. There's a couple of other things. You'll notice if I just sort of go up here, I've got this guy selected, and let's look at our stats. That not only do we have materials on here sort of already set up, so we've got these materials already sort of set up on here. We've got our white car paint, and then this one is a white high gloss plastic. There's also a ton of selection sets and parts. And look at all the parts here. Just in this one guy, there's all these different parts. So if I click that, you'll see that that's a part there. Now these are useful in that if you want to like do some re-texturizing on here, I can go over to my P tag drop down and select parts instead of materials and press 4. So if you hover, for some reason it's not showing up in advanced viewport. Let me just go to default real quick. You'll see that the outline right there. I can quickly get this ring and just holding down Alt and clicking and pushing 3 for convert to polygons. I can convert those to polygons there, then just press M. In fact, I don't even think I have to convert those to polygons. I think I could just grab these. Say I want a different material here, right? So I press 4 and then just select my parts, and then I just press M. We'll just call this red and make it red. It's just all those part selection sets being in there. It's nice to quickly, if you want to do some quick selection and new materials on your items, it's nice to have all these in here. However, it also bogs down the file a bit. So, if I select all these different items here, all these different mesh items, this list is going to get really long. Look at our little scroll bar here. It's just huge, right? There's all these different parts. And these correspond to what are called bodies and I think surfaces in SolidWorks. I'm trying to remember. I used to know this. Bottom line is it's useful to have these here if you need to select them for doing your materials or doing something else, but you may want to blow them away at the end. And one quick way if I want to blow away my selection sets is I just select all of my items here like this, and I go over here to select, and actually my bad, I got to make sure I'm in polygon mode here. I wonder if item mode will work as well. Let me just try it in item mode. So let's try this again. Let's go to select, and then, nope, delete selection set is not active. Let's try in polygon mode. It seems really weird. Why would it not be? Yeah, now, so weirdly, it looks like you have to be in polygon mode to delete selection sets. But you can just hit delete selection sets, then hit all sets, and hit OK. And now our selection sets here are going to get blown out. So, whoops, there they go. So that's all empty now. Parts, one quick way of doing parts, I can't remember if you can actually just delete parts. Let me go to polygon here. I don't think you can actually just delete parts. So what you do is you just rename them all to default. Let me just go back down under here. So we can actually do it from the drop down under polygon set part, or you can just go over here to the polygon tab and go to set part and then just call it default with everything selected in polygon mode, and it's going to just rename all those parts to default. So you only have one part now. And that'll cut down your file size by probably, at least 10%. So now we just have that one part instead of hundreds of them. Again, on really big files, it may cut down the file size by 30%. So it's a big deal to maybe do that when you're at that point in your project. So there's not a whole lot else to talk about here with SolidWorks. I will mention this. Let me just select this guy. Let's go over to vertex maps, and you'll see under other map, there's a normal map. And what that is a vertex map telling the renderer which polygon, where it's smooth and where it's flat. And it works out really well. You shouldn't have to mess with it. Ideally, you never have to mess with it. Let me just pop open the render window here real quick and just sort of scooch this. I don't know why that's so fat there. Scooch this over and we'll through our camera. And you'll notice, I'll just push in a little bit. You'll notice, that it's pretty nice, right? So the smooth parts are smooth. Let me just scooch this over. Close that and scooch over. It's funny how working in a 1920 by 1080 window is tiny now, and it used to be huge way back in the day when I was working on 3D. Anyway, so yes, you see everything's nice and smooth where it's supposed to be. It's nice and flat where it's supposed to be. Again, you don't have tessellation options when you bring these in, so you can see a little bit of faceting there, but generally it's okay. We're pretty close to this guy, so it looks pretty good. Far away. Yeah, so if you have problems in shading, you can delete your right click on these and delete your vertex normal maps, and then use MODO's material options. So you can go over here to the materials. You'll notice that there's some normal shading over here in the materials with smoothing angles and normal method with nulls and default. And you can weight by polygon area. Often clicking that will fix your issues. So, something to look into if you're having problems with shading. Okay, I think that's enough for the native importer. I probably spent way too much time on that, actually. Let's move on to power translators. All right, let's fire up power translators and see what sort of options our $500 got us. So I'm going to go to open, and I'm going to look at my scooter here. Now, if you have power translators installed, you'll see step and IGEST, all those file types it supports in the file requester as loadable files. So I'm going to pick my step or STP file here and open it up. And now I've got a lot of options. So the first option is the output item, and then we're going to get either meshes, CAD items, or static meshes. We already covered static meshes with the SolidWorks importers. I'll cover CAD items in a minute. For this one, I'm going to load up meshes. I want all my items to be meshes. For the duplicates, we have several options. We've got copy, instance. Copy is just another mesh. Instance or replicator. Replicator is nice. In fact, it's really nice when you have things like nuts and bolts and screws and washers. You may have thousands of those in a product, and replicators are very efficient with that. So I'm going to go with replicator, although this scooter probably doesn't have as many replicatable items, but that's fine. So mesh quality presets. So the default settings are generally just fine, but you can actually go in here and dial it up to super fine or all the way down to coarse, and you're really just going to have to play around with those to find out what's best for your project. Super fine's honestly got to be super overkill for anything unless you're zooming in at 4K to some really close-up part of your product and you don't want to see any polygonal faceting at all. But honestly, default settings are probably going to be fine. Just start there. So for the up axis, again, kind of a crapshoot. Some of the CAD programs are Z up, so just keep it Y. MODO's Y. You might have to rotate stuff. You never know. User bounding box, honestly, I'm not sure what that's for. Rest on ground, we'll try to rest your items on the ground, although you don't need that checked. I think you just keep it off. Use proxy. I think there's some proxy files that these Power Translator series of products can use with these different 3D programs. Never used it. I really have no idea what it does. It may be worth looking into if you use get super heavy CAD items. I typically don't, so it's not something I've looked into. And I usually keep import materials checked, although if you're bringing in a step file, the odds you're getting materials aren't great. So let's just hit OK and see what we got. Okay, so here's our scooter. And you notice that it did come in our side, on that side, so we're going to rotate that back up. And here's our replicators. So they're just bounding boxes here, but if you see this little guy, I can make them render fully. And I'll just actually turn them back to bounding boxes for now. And we're going to talk a little bit about CAD cleanup real fast. If you look at the shader tree, didn't bring in anything. Just white material, right? So this didn't bring in any materials, and often you just don't get those with step files and power translators. And so let's take a look at, I guess let's first look at our replicators and our geometry. So you'll see two folders here. One says replicator particles. It's an empty mesh with a couple of other meshes parented underneath it. And the electric scooter one, which is just a whole bunch of stuff. So these are all the different mesh items in there, and they're named actually, which is great. Battery pack, disc brake, rear fender, or rear fender. It says rear fender. I think they mean rear fender. So it's nice to see the names come in, where SolidWorks files is often just a bunch of like alphanumeric characters. And we've got our two replicators down here at the bottom. And the replicators, you'll see it has a prototype. So this brake here would be one prototype. And it's using a point source, brakes parentheses 2. And that's up here, the point source in our replicator particles folder. So brakes 2, that's just a vertex somewhere here on our screen. So probably one of these two. If I just right click or middle, just select brakes here and go to vertices and just middle click and drag, there it is. So if I move this guy around, you'll see I'm moving that replicator around. Let me just turn off vertices here, like that. So one thing you want to do when I turn this, I showed you this for a reason. When you turn this thing back on its side, you don't want to translate or transform any of those particles. You just want to transform the replicators, which are parented into this assembly. So if I make a locator here by pressing L, and we'll just name this master, I don't want to parent both of these to the master. I'm going to get double translations, meaning if I do that and I rotate this, not only am I rotating the replicators here, those purple replicator items, I'm also rotating the points that they're feeding off of, and they're going to sort of fly off into space. You see how they flew off into space there? So let me just undo that. And what I really want to do is just parent my folder of geometry and replicators to my locator. And then when I rotate them, everything stays together, all nice and tidy like you want it. And then we get into the, let's take a look at our model and see if anything's all, screwed up in here and see if we need to change anything. So let me actually change this background to default so we can see this a little better. And one thing I noticed is one of these items came in flipped. And sometimes you'll see this, like the polygons are just flipped. You can kind of tell they're inside out here. And because it's just a regular mesh item, not a static mesh item, I can just hit F to flip them back. And that generally will do the trick. If it's a static mesh, you got to right-click, change type to regular mesh, and then flip it. But also, you'll notice that there's a couple of other screw-ups here, and the handles are a little wacky. Actually, let me go back to default. And if I look at the handles here, or this handle, you'll see that we're missing some polygons. And this often happens when importing CAD files. It's partly, it may be the problem with the translator. It may be the problem with the guy who made the CAD model. And just, this stuff just didn't translate very well because his scene was kind of sloppy. It's hard to say. But I generally have very few problems. Again, this is coming from GrabCad. This isn't necessarily a manufacturable item that I would get from one of my clients. Typically, when I get step files from clients, I very rarely have missing or flipped polygons like this. But, then you have to go in here and clean it up. And you have to decide, do I want to go in here and play, MODO? Again, MODO's great at this. It's great at direct modeling and cleaning stuff up. So you can go in there and MODO and, start creating polygons and sort of filling in these holes. For this type of thing, I'd probably just remodel it using MODO's own modeling tools because I could do this in like 5 minutes, no problem. So anyway, you just have to decide what you're going to do. But, there is a sort of process of checking out your geometry and making sure everything looks good. Oftentimes with my clients, I'll just do a quick turntable. So I'll just, parent to a locator and I'll do a little turntable and render it out and send that over to them and just say, hey, take a look at this. Let me know if any parts are missing. You're the expert on this product, not me. Let me know if there's any problems, and you'll sort of get to it that way. But you'll also notice that it has things like our normal vertex maps. If I go to vertex maps, my normal maps are back, so I get really nice shading on that automatically, and it should just look good. Let me just bring up, I'm actually going to bring up Octane here to take a look at this. I think Octane may render a little faster, so let me just pop open Octane and hit go. I'm going to load up the geometry. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. Like everything looking nice and smooth. It's got kind of it's my environment background on here. Kind of, again, you never really know what you're going to get. Oh, it's okay, 4-color gradient. That's not bad. So yeah, the geometry is looking good. Like the default settings were fine for the tessellation. You're not going to get quads, but honestly, you really shouldn't need them if you're just doing product rendering or general mechanism of action animation. If you have tubes and things like that that need to be deformed, you're generally going to remodel those in MODO anyway and rig them up. And sometimes like people are obsessed with having quads and UVs and everything, but you really don't need that. So I'm just going to open the same thing back up, but this time I'm going to select copy, and I'm going to select CAD item, and we're going to hit OK. Okay, here's our scooter loaded in as CAD items. Now this is actually kind of fascinating. If I do my flip my folder here, you can see these little white geometry icons. These are actually called CAD items, and I can let me just grab one in the viewport here and push in, and you'll see it's actually a CAD surface. And so you've got CAD surfaces, whether this is a surface or a solid, I don't know. But it's a CAD surface in MODO, which, if you're a MODO user, is a polygon and subdivision surface modeling program. So it's interesting to see these in here. And you'll see a draw mode where it says CAD or poly. So we switch to poly, you can see the tessellation on that. All right. Let me just pick a simpler object like this one. In fact, this sort of bugs me that we're, again, on our side. So I'm just going to add a locator, parent that guy to the locator. And we'll rotate this 90 degrees on X. Get it standing upright the right way this time. And yeah, let's take a look at maybe this item here. Let's just isolate it and kind of push in. So here it is. It's, you know, displaying as a surface, super smooth there, right? But let's look at it as a polygon, as you know, tessellated into polygons. So that's our preview. That's how it's going to render. And we can actually go in here and tweak our tessellation right here in MODO. So if I want this, say that's not smooth enough for me, oh, that's pretty good. I can reduce my angle, let's say 5 degrees, and let's have our maximum angle, let's just do divided by 2, or maximum edge length, and distance tolerance, so let's just divide that by 2, and then hit update regular tessellation, then you're going to see this change here in the viewport. So hit that, and there you just saw more edges added, right? So now it's even nicer. So that's pretty cool. Now I cannot go in here and select polygons. I'm in polygon mode, cannot select polygons, cannot mess with the UVs, cannot do anything. I can go over here and right click and say change type, and I can just change this to a mesh and do all that stuff, which is cool. Let me just unisolate it. And what's interesting is MODO will render this. It will render these CAD services based on those tessellation properties in each item. So let me just look through my camera here. And there's my scooter. And I wonder if these handles are fixed if I load in CAD surfaces. It almost looks like they are, which is interesting. So that's one thing you can do is try loading in CAD surfaces, CAD items, and your tessellation problems may be fixed. I wonder if I try to tessellate or convert one of these guys, if it's going to be all messed up. But that actually looks pretty good. And if I go over here, I can just go to my preview render, hit go, and there it is. And MODO is actually rendering these services. Now, if I try to render this in Octane, I am not going to get anything. I'm not going to get this tessellation data filtered up to Octane. I'm going to have to convert these to regular mesh items. And again, if I'm doing, let's say I've got my brakes selected here, and I hit F to show it in the item list. I can right click and I can add go to shade and do create item mask, and I could do my shading masking like that. Let's just make this red so it shows up. But again, I can't get in there and deal with the polygons. So it's really up to you if you're going to, if you're going to keep these as CAD items or convert them. Looks like this is still a little messed up in there. So again, you'd probably want to remodel those or something like that. But anyway, CAD items is an interesting option. And I'm curious, this may actually be a really small file size as well. Typically CAD file sizes are quite small. You'll see I'm getting some weird normals down here. So I may want to, let me just select this guy. And this is the one that was flipped, if you remember. And when we loaded up as just meshes. So let's change this to a mesh and flip it by pressing F, and yeah, there we go, it fixes it. So you can do some cleanup in you know, in the CAD item method as well. You just convert them to meshes and do whatever cleanup you want, and blah blah blah. If you want to add service decals and things like that and do some UVing, no problem. So anyway, bottom line is Powertranslators, it's $500, but it gives you a lot of options. And honestly, if you do a lot of CAD work in MODO, then you're gonna want it. It's basically a must-have. It's not basically a must-have. It's a must-have if you do a lot of CAD work in MODO, and it's pretty cool. They can load in replicators and CAD items and stuff like that. So last, let's just clear this out and look at CAD Assist, which is pretty sweet because it's free. You've got file requester on the left. It's super simple. Let's just start off with that Mando helmet we looked at earlier. And let's load up the IGES file. I don't think we've loaded up an IGES yet. And here you go. So, you know, you got right mouse is zoom, left mouse is rotate, and middle mouse is pan. And so that's sort of a typical sort of CAD program navigation system. And you can do some simple things here. You can, you know, click here and get some, you know, wireframe or flat shaded or, you know, this sort of shading methods. You can look at some cross sections over here with this, you know, look at a half or a quarter or whatever. CAD items or CAD surfaces or solids are able to do this extremely quickly. It's just instant booleans. Like when I mean instant, it's just instant. which is pretty cool. Wish we could do that with polygons. Yeah, there's a few other things. You can isolate some items if you want to. You can also look at the tree here and look at all the different parts. And yeah, that's basically it. And then you can click this disk here, and then you can export it in any of these formats. So we've got different CAD formats like IGES. STL is like a printable, typically like a printable polygonal format, really highly tessellated. So that'll go into MODO. MODO can load STL files. OBJ, which is what we'll be trying, good old OBJ, you can get out of here. GITF, the Web 3D sort of file formats, WRL is another older one, and some others. So let's take a look. So let's do an experiment. Let's take a look at the scooter that we had a couple problems with in Powertranslators. It's loaded into CAD Assist. See how it does with it, and we'll see if maybe there's a problem. If Powertranslators is to blame for a few of the bad polys, or if it's actually the file. So let's actually just go back to wherever I was here. Open, and let's do the scooter, and we'll pick the STP file. Okay, here we are. Kind of maybe came in a little upside down. We just sort of put it this way. If you look over here, yeah, it came in as sort of Z up and upside down. I also have no idea what the scale is. So I have no idea if we're dealing with the correct scale here. So we'll find that out as well when we get to orientation and scale when we get back into MODO. But it does look like these handles look pretty sweet, so we'll see if we can spit those out as clean mesh geometry as an OBJ file. So that'll be interesting to see what it can do with that. And this bottom looks okay. So yeah, let's take a look. Let's spit this out as an OBJ and bring it into MODO and see what it looks like. So we're just going to come up here, and we're going to select OBJ down here. And I kind of wonder, units, question mark, question mark. Okay, we will do millimeters, and we'll do Y up coordinate mapping. And there is no tessellation options, so we'll just get as many triangles as it gives us, I guess. So let's hit save. We're going to write over that one I had done previously, and that was pretty quick. Okay, here we are in MODO. I'm just going to add a locator in here and get this bike rotated correctly. So again, let's move those camera and lights to the top. Don't parent the replicator group, just the meshes. And let's just get this upright, 90 degrees, looks good. Okay, scale-wise, Powertranslators seems to always get the scale right, and it just recognizes it from the CAD file. This is a 50 millimeter grid here, and let's see how big our OBJ was, see if I guessed both the up axis and the scale to be right, or if I'm way off. So I'm just going to import that OBJ into the same scene here, and we'll see if it's super huge or super small or the exact right size. And you can see it's super huge. So if I look up and I sit around the same amount, I've got 50 meters versus 50 millimeters. And also it's upside down. So we are almost right on the axis. It was Y, but it's flipped. And so I'm actually going to make sure I'm just going to rotate these polygons. So I've got just make sure I've got the OBJ selected here. And I'm going to go to polygons, and I'm going to rotate the polygons from the origin. So Alt-W, just make sure, or you just grab it from the drop down here. Make sure you're in origin, action center. And we'll just rotate that around 90 degrees. Or I'm sorry, 180, not 90. Like so. And then we need it to be, what, 1/100th as big? Is that right? So from 50 meters to 50 millimeters. Actually, 1/1000th, because millimeters to meters is 100, so to 5 meters would be 100. So 1/1000th. So again, staying in the action center here, origin, I'm going to be 0.1%. And scale it down. Let's see if we are the right size now. I think we are, right. So here you can see, if I just hide this one, that's where the replicators are, right? And so here's my handle from my Powertranslators right here. And then if I turn this on, here's my model from the OBJ that we brought in. And I'm just going to isolate the OBJ. We just want this handle from the OBJ, right? So, you may want to try go in and just double click polys like this. But you'll notice this isn't quite working, right? So I'm only getting, these aren't connected, like the vertices are not fused. And this is pretty typical with CAD files that you bring in. And these services are all separate. But we might get lucky with parts. Remember, parts come in as well. The polygon tag parts in MODO is often like a group in the CAD program. So if we go to a part here and we select by polygon selection set and we just grab that, we got lucky and it grabbed the whole thing. So I'm just going to Alt-3 to convert the polygons. I'm going to Control-C copy it, and then I'll hide that mesh, and then we'll just unisolate everything. And so here's our mesh from Powertranslators. We'll just see the handle item there and press N for new, and that's going to make a new mesh. I'm going to paste in our new handle there. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to hide the old one, and I'll rename this handle. And I'm going to just do let me just go ahead and isolate it here. It's sometimes nice to do a little mesh cleanup and see if that'll merge those vertices. So merged values, merged vertices 6,247. Looks pretty good. And so we'll just also name it that white right there. And then I think we're going to be good. So if I unisolate it, and then I go down here we'll just fix the replicator. So let's turn on replicators so we can steal our replicators. Now this is referencing the old bad handle, the one we have hidden. So let's just select our replicator down at the bottom here. The handle replicator is the handle replicator. And instead of the prototype handle, we're going to be using, did we name this thing? Yeah, a small, what's it called? Handle new, we'll do that. So go down to our handle replicator, and for prototype, whoops, we'll just, there's a little search box at the top, you can't see it, but I'm going to type in handle, H-A-N-D, pick handle new, and there we go. There's our new handle. Now we may want to grab our handle new, and we probably goofed up our vertex maps there, a little surface normal maps. I'm just going to delete that and get our shading back. And we'll just use MODO's, shading, normal shading on the material, smoothing angle on the material to fix that. But yeah, looks good. So we essentially fixed our scooter's bad handles with this free program called CAD Assist, and I'll put the download link in the description. So that's a win. So you wouldn't probably just want to use CAD Assist on a regular basis because, again, the scale was way off. It was gigantic. It was upside down. It was just one giant block of polygons in one item. Didn't use replicators or instances or CAD items or any of the nice things Powertranslators had. But it did do a better job of tessellating these weird, these sort of difficult handles. That's a difficult tessellation job. But yeah, with the combination of the two, we're able to get our finished scooter here, and it looks good. Let's just check the render real quick and finish the video. Boom, let's look through a camera. Let's come on into this handle, like so. Yeah, looks good. Looking sweet. Turn off our lights so we don't have that shadow. All right, yeah. Looks good. And the MODO's just material shading is the smoothing angle on the material is good enough, and it looks, even though we deleted the surface normals, the vertex map, it's nice and smooth. So looks good. So that was long, I know. I'll put chapters, so to speak, in the description, so you could just jump to whatever parts you want. But it's a big subject, and honestly, this would be like a 2-hour class or something. If we had a 3-hour class, we had to go through CAD formats and importing and cleanup. But, this is just a, whatever, 40-minute primer, I suppose.
Yum, yum!